The bell above the door chimed like crystal. Inside Merrick and Company, a luxury tailor shop that smelled of cedarwood and soft cashmere. Everything was designed to feel expensive. The kind of quiet where people lower their voices not out of respect, but out of ego. The mirrors were spotless. The floors gleamed. And behind the counter stood a man no one really saw anymore. Mr. Alvarez, 74. Tailor. Immigrant. Hands calloused from decades of stitching dignity into other people's clothing. Today, like every day, he wore a press shirt, roll cuffs, and shoes that had been resoled 3 times. His glasses slid down his nose. His gait was slower than it once was. But his work? Flawless. "Why is the old man still doing measurements?" said a voice from the velvet sofa. It came from Trent, a finance guy in tailored arrogance and designer socks, seated beside a woman scrolling on her phone. "I mean, I'm paying $2,000 for a blazer, not a retirement story." His friend chuckled. "Maybe it comes with a side of Werther's Originals." The woman didn't laugh, but she didn't stop them either. Mr. Alvarez pretended not to hear. He unfolded the measuring tape and approached the next client, a tall man with rain-damp hair and a quiet posture. The order form read, Keanu R. The room didn't know who he was yet, because he hadn't spoken. Mr. Alvarez cleared his throat. "If you'll raise your arm, sir." Keanu obeyed, silent, observant. The tailor's hands worked carefully, measuring shoulder width, sleeve length. His knuckles were swollen. His fingers trembled, but never misread a seam. Across the room, Trent watched, amused. "Hey, Grandpa, you gonna finish before fall collection hits?" Mr. Alvarez's hands paused, just for a breath, then kept going. The woman on the sofa frowned. "That's not funny." But Trent didn't stop. He pointed to Mr. Alvarez's worn shoes. "Those soles older than your tape measure?" Keanu's voice finally broke the air. Low, even. "Those shoes have probably walked farther than you've read." The room froze. Trent blinked. "Sorry, what?" Keanu stepped down from the pedestal, turned to face him, still calm, but no smile. "You're in a store where a man builds art with his hands, and you're trying to be funny about his shoes?" He gestured to Mr. Alvarez. "Do you know how many years it takes to make hands like his? How many jackets, shoulders, collars? He's not slow. He's the reason this place has a name at all." No one spoke. Keanu looked at the woman. "Do you laugh too?" She shook her head, quietly. "No." Keanu turned to Mr. Alvarez. Then, with deliberate care, he bent down and tied the old man's shoelace where it had come undone. A gesture so small, so disarming, it shattered the room's entire structure. "I don't need the fancy fitting room," he said. "I'd like Mr. Alvarez to finish my suit." Then added, "And if he ever stops working here, I won't either." Outside, the bell chimed again as Trent left, red-faced and quiet. And inside, the mirrors stayed clean. But now, they reflected the right person. In the backroom of Merrick and Company, the air smelled of chalk dust, wool, and quiet routine. Spools of thread lined the walls in hundreds of colors. Tailor's shears hung like relics. A single lamp lit the workbench where suits weren't just adjusted. They were rescued. And there, with careful hands and eyes older than most of the garments he handled, sat Mr. Alvarez. He hadn't spoken since the incident on the floor. He just sat at his bench, gently unfolding the navy cloth that would become Keanu's jacket. Merrick, the owner, sharp-suited and surgically polite, stepped in from the showroom. "You're still working on that order?" he asked, brows slightly raised. Mr. Alvarez nodded. "The lining needs extra structure. The shoulders will want double-hand stitching." Merrick sighed through his nose. "Try not to overdo it. This is Los Angeles, not Milan." Mr. Alvarez kept sewing. No argument. No pause. He knew how to make suits that outlasted the cities they were made in. In the front room, Keanu sat quietly, leafing through a book on 1960s suiting patterns. He wasn't waiting. He was giving time. And he knew what that cost in this world. The woman from the sofa, now feeling noticeably small in her curated outfit, approached him. "Was that real?" she asked softly. "What you said." Keanu looked up. Which part? That if Mr. Alvarez stops working here, you stop too? He nodded once. She looked down at the floor. I've been coming here for years. I never even knew his name. Now you do, Keanu said gently. She hesitated. Do you always defend strangers like that? Keanu closed the book. Only the ones who remind me of people who built the world while no one was looking. Back in the workshop, Mr. Alvarez laid a hand flat across the half-stitch fabric. His hands trembled less now. He reached up to a shelf and took down a wooden box. Inside were antique tools, a bone-handled thimble, chalk from Havana, a tiny needle case carved with initials, A.M., for his wife, Anna Maria. He hadn't opened that box in 5 years. Not since the day Merrick told him to streamline the process. But today, something in him stirred. A reason to go slow. Not because he had to, but because it meant something again. The following morning, when Keanu returned for a fitting, Mr. Alvarez was already standing at the pedestal. He held the jacket like a father holding his child for the first time. Keanu removed his coat, stepped forward. Mr. Alvarez dressed him with the care of a museum curator. Tug, adjust, pinch, smooth. He didn't speak, not until the final sleeve was in place. Then, softly, he said, "This thread comes from my village." Keanu blinked. "The blue?" Mr. Alvarez nodded. "Same we use for church suits. Marriages, funerals. Men came to me when they needed to be seen." He paused. "Thank you for seeing me." Keanu nodded. You reminded them who the suit is for. The next morning at Merrick and Company, sunlight streamed through the high windows, illuminating polished wood floors and racks of perfectly spaced jackets. Mr. Alvarez arrived early. As always, he moved slowly but with purpose, adjusting displays, aligning hangers. His tools were already laid out at his workbench. Scissors oiled, thimble in place, hands ready. For the first time in years, he was humming. The front bell chimed. A new client entered, all swagger and sunglasses. Declan Reeves. No relation to that Reeves. Mid-30s. Hollywood PR agent. Expensive haircut, louder watch. The type who walked into Tailor shops like they owed him spotlight. Merrick emerged instantly. "Declan, welcome back, my friend." Declan air-kissed the air beside Marek's cheek. "Gotta look tight for this premiere next week. Something sharp. Black. Undeniable." Merrick gestured to the pedestal. "Let's get you measured." Declan turned and saw Mr. Alvarez approaching, tape in hand. He recoiled slightly. Wait. That who's measuring me?" Merrick stiffened. "Mr. Alvarez is our senior." "Yeah, I know, legend, heritage, whatever," Declan interrupted. "But I'm paying premium. Don't want shaky hands messing with my inseam." The room went still. Mr. Alvarez stopped mid-step, then, quietly, turned and began to walk away. But from the lounge area came a voice. "You're about to say something you'll regret." Declan turned, and there was Keanu, in black jeans, plain shirt, holding a book on Neapolitan suit construction. He hadn't been there moments before, but somehow he was now. Declan squinted. "Wait, you're—" Keanu stood, walked slowly toward the measuring area. "I've had 3 suits made here," he said, "each one by Mr. Alvarez." He stopped beside the tailor, then looked Declan in the eye. "If you're scared of old hands, maybe you shouldn't wear grown man clothes." Declan bristled. "I mean—" Keanu didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. He just said, "You think your name will last longer than this thread?" Declan opened his mouth, then shut it. Merrick cleared his throat, flustered. "Perhaps, Declan, we can begin with fabric swatches while Mr. Alvarez assists another client." But no one moved, because Keanu held up a finger, then said, "Actually, I'm here for a final fitting, and I'll wait until Mr. Alvarez is free." He sat, crossed his legs, and opened the book again. Declan stood frozen for a beat, then muttered, "Whatever, man," and retreated toward the changing room. Later that afternoon, Keanu stood once more on the pedestal. Mr. Alvarez adjusted the shoulder seam. "You didn't have to do that," the old man said. I didn't, Keanu replied. I wanted to. He turned slightly, testing the fit. Besides, he added, sometimes it's not about silencing someone, just reminding the room who's worth listening to. Mr. Alvarez smiled and smoothed the final lapel. The next day, Mr. Alvarez found a yellow slip on his workbench. Typed, "No greeting," just a sentence. Final fitting delays are unacceptable. Keep pace or step aside. Merrick. He read it twice, then folded it once, slowly, and slipped it into his pocket. His hands trembled, but not from age this time. In the showroom, Merrick paced behind the front counter. He was nervous. His phone buzzed with client messages, a supplier delay, and a calendar reminder that screamed, "Influencer fitting, Thursday." No mistakes. Keanu's quiet loyalty was starting to make waves, and not the kind Merrick liked. He needed speed, not sentiment. Polish, not poetry. And most of all, control. Sydney, a junior tailor in training, noticed a change. She found Mr. Alvarez at his bench later that afternoon, redrafting a sleeve pattern by hand, the old-school way, with chalk and patience. "Is it true?" she asked softly. "He told you to step aside?" Mr. Alvarez didn't look up. He asked for speed. She hesitated, then said, "You're the only reason I wanted this job. You know that, right?" Mr. Alvarez paused, then offered a faint smile, then learned to slow down. At 5:42 p.m., Keanu arrived. His jacket was ready. Mr. Alvarez helped him into it, without a word. Keanu rotated his shoulders, checked the line in the mirror. Perfect, but he didn't comment on the fit. He looked at the tailor's face. "You okay?" he asked. Mr. Alvarez opened his mouth, then closed it, then said simply, "The thread is strong, but the needle's tired." Keanu understood. He unbuttoned the jacket and handed it back. "I have an idea." The next morning, Merrick entered the shop and stopped short. Every mirror in the fitting area had been covered. In their place, photographs, black and white prints, old, grainy, beautiful, of suits hand-stitched by Mr. Alvarez across the decades. Weddings, graduations, soldiers returning home. A whole wall of men and women, made visible by what he crafted on them. And beneath it all, a brass plaque, newly installed, gleaming. This thread built more than suits. It built lives. K. Reeves. Merrick stared at it, tight-jawed, then saw something else. Customers. 3 of them, already seated, waiting, holding order forms. One of them pointed to a photo. "Can a man who made that still work here?" Merrick didn't answer, because from the back room, Mr. Alvarez stepped out in a clean white shirt, scissors at his side, and Keanu standing silently behind him. Merrick swallowed his pride and said, "Mr. Alvarez will take your measurements." The following afternoon, the shop phone rang. It wasn't a client. It was a school counselor from Eastwood High, just a few blocks away. She spoke quickly, nervously. A senior named Mateo needed a suit for graduation. His family couldn't afford one. She had called every rental place in town. No one could help until someone gave her the number to Merrick and Company. "Your name was on a note," she said, "signed by Keanu Reeves." Merrick blinked, then looked at the schedule. He had 3 influencer fittings that day, and no time, but Keanu happened to be in the lounge, sipping tea like he owned the place, which at this point felt possible. Merrick called over. "This high school thing, is it yours?" Keanu looked up calmly. "Yes." Merrick hesitated. "It's not a charity shop. I can't comp a full custom build." Keanu stood, walked over, set his jacket on the counter, then said, "You already did." 10 minutes later, Mateo arrived. Nervous, shoulders hunched, shirt too big. He tried to hide the scuff on his sneakers with the cuff of his jeans. Mr. Alvarez greeted him. "No fuss, no questions. Stand on the box," he said gently. Mateo climbed up. "I don't want to waste anyone's time," he mumbled. Mr. Alvarez looped the tape measure around his chest. "You're not." Mateo blinked, then stood straighter. Keanu watched from the side, didn't interfere, didn't film, didn't instruct. He just stayed. present, like a quiet guardian of something finally going right. The suit was ready in 3 days. Not a rush job. A miracle. Midnight blue, not black, because Mr. Alvarez said, "You'll look like yourself in blue." Mateo returned for the pickup. He held it like it might break. "This really mine?" Mr. Alvarez nodded. "Made by hand." Mateo turned to Keanu. "You did this?" Keanu shook his head. "No, he did." He nodded to Mr. Alvarez. "I just made sure you found him in time." That evening, Keanu returned to his own fitting room. The original suit, the one Mr. Alvarez had tailored so carefully, still hung there. But Keanu didn't take it home. Instead, he asked Sidney to cover it in plastic, fold it gently, and tag it with a note. "For the next person who needs to be seen." Kiar, the mirrors of Merrick and Company no longer reflected ego. Now they reflected a legacy. One stitch, one suit, one sew at a time. 1 week later, Sidney unlocked the shop early. She wasn't usually the first in, but Mr. Alvarez had taken 2 days off, his first break in years, and someone had to prep the floor. She flipped the lights on. Stopped cold. The wall had changed. Where there had once been a sleek bronze plaque that read Merrick and Company in bold serif font, now there was something else beneath it. A second line. Smaller, quieter, but unmistakable. And Alvarez. Sidney blinked, stepped closer, ran her fingers along the letters like they might vanish, then turned and saw Merrick in the doorway, holding 2 coffees. "I wasn't going to tell anyone," he said, voice even. Sidney raised an eyebrow. "You added him to the wall." Merrick nodded once. He built the wall. By mid-morning, the staff knew. Customers noticed too. Some paused to take photos. One older client, who hadn't visited in years, whispered, "About time." And Mr. Alvarez? He walked in around noon, wearing a freshly pressed shirt and the faintest look of suspicion, the kind old men get when something is too clean. He froze when he saw the sign, didn't speak for a long time, then turned to Merrick. "I didn't ask for this," he said. "You didn't need to," Merrick replied. "You earned it." Mr. Alvarez stood still for a few seconds more, then nodded, just once, and walked to the back room to begin work. Later that day, Keanu stopped by. No appointment, just a quiet drop-in. Sidney greeted him at the door, beaming. "You see it?" she asked. Keanu looked up. Read the full sign. His face didn't change much. Just a slight lift of one eyebrow. But his voice was warm. "I see it." In the back, Mr. Alvarez was repairing a tear on an old jacket someone had brought in from the 1980s. A shoulder seemed blown out, lining crumbling. Keanu knocked gently on the doorframe. The tailor looked up, then gestured toward the stool near the sewing bench. Keanu sat. They didn't talk for a long time. Only the sound of needle, thread, pull, snip. Then Mr. Alvarez said, "You could have started your own shop." Keanu leaned back. "Too clean. Too new. No ghosts." Mr. Alvarez looked amused. "You like ghosts?" "I like places where people matter more than walls." A pause. Then Mr. Alvarez reached into the small drawer beside him, pulled out a tiny velvet box. Inside, a silver thimble. Old, polished smooth from years of use. He handed it over. "This was my first one. Havana, 1965. Keanu blinked. "I can't take this." "You're not taking it," Mr. Alvarez said. "You're borrowing it until someone else shows you they've earned it more." Keanu closed the box slowly, tucked it into his coat, then smiled. "I'll keep it safe." That Thursday afternoon, just after the lunch lull, the bell above the door rang with metallic chime. Sidney looked up from the swatch book. The man who entered wasn't a celebrity. He wasn't loud. He wore a suit that had faded from black to uncertain gray. Shoes cracked at the toes. Hair combed with care, though it had thinned long ago. He paused just past the entrance, eyes scanning the room like he wasn't sure he was supposed to be here. "Can I help you, sir?" Sidney asked gently. He hesitated. I came to check if..." His voice caught. "If you might still have a suit. From 30 years ago." In the back, Mr. Alvarez paused mid-stitch. The voice. Old, strained, but familiar. He stepped out slowly. His eyes widened the moment he saw the man. Raphael. The man turned and smiled. Crooked, tooth gap, exactly as Alvarez remembered. Still breathing, my friend. They clasped hands, not like men their age usually do, but like brothers who had survived something together. 30 years ago, Raphael had ordered a wedding suit, hand-stitched Havana style, midnight linen, notch lapel, but he never picked it up. His fiancée had called off the wedding the day before. Shame kept him away. I was too embarrassed, he admitted. Couldn't face you. Couldn't wear it. So I left town. Left the suit. Mr. Alvarez didn't scold. Didn't mock. He just said, I kept it anyway. Raphael blinked. You what? I moved shops 4 times, Alvarez said, already walking toward the storage room. It came with me every time. He returned holding a garment bag. Dusty, zipped, but the tag was still legible. Raphael, July 1994. Mr. Alvarez laid it gently across the counter and unzipped it. Inside, perfect. The deep blue hadn't faded. The buttons still gleamed. The fabric had survived better than either man. Raphael stared at it, eyes full. Try it on, Mr. Alvarez said. I don't know if it'll. Try. He stepped into the fitting room, came out slowly. The jacket slid onto him, like it had been waiting too. He stood in front of the mirror, silent, then whispered, I didn't know I still deserved to look like this. From the corner, Keanu, who'd just arrived, quietly as ever, said, You never stopped. Raphael turned. I thought I'd missed my moment. Mr. Alvarez smiled. We don't make suits for moments, he said. We make them for people. The moments just catch up. The other customers had stopped pretending not to listen, and in that quiet shop on a random Thursday, everyone remembered why tailoring wasn't just fabric. It was redemption sewn in straight lines. That evening, with the shop mostly cleared and the sun casting gold through the windows, Keanu remained seated in the lounge. He sipped tea from a chipped ceramic mug. Not the fine cups Merritt preferred, but one Sydney had brought from home. It said, threading through life, hand-painted and slightly off-center. Mr. Alvarez was folding the suit Raphael had worn, pressing each crease with care, even though the man had refused to take it for free. Leave it here, Raphael had said, until I'm brave enough to wear it again. And so it waited, pressed, patient. Keanu set his cup down, then asked quietly, Who made your first suit? Mr. Alvarez looked up, surprised. Mine. Keanu nodded. You've made hundreds, thousands, for others. But who made yours? Mr. Alvarez leaned back, eyes far away now. My father, he said. In Cuba, 1953, I was 12. He said I was finally a man. Keanu smiled. What did it look like? Terrible, Alvarez laughed. The shoulders were uneven, stitching crooked, one leg shorter than the other. He gestured with his hands, but it was perfect. He stood and walked to the back, returned with an old photo, edges curled, black and white, faded. A boy stood beside a smiling man, both in suits that hung slightly off-center. That's you? Keanu asked. Mr. Alvarez nodded. I wore that suit until it fell apart. Didn't matter how it looked. It mattered that someone made it just for me. He paused and said softly, No one forgets their first suit. If it's made with care, it lives forever. Keanu studied the photo, then reached into his jacket and pulled out the silver thimble Mr. Alvarez had given him days ago. He placed it gently on the table between them. Mr. Alvarez frowned. Too soon to return. I'm not, Keanu said, but someone else is ready. They both turned as Sydney approached, wiping graphite from her fingers. She hesitated. Did I interrupt? Keanu gestured to the thimble. Sit. She did, wide-eyed, curious. Keanu looked at Mr. Alvarez. She's ready, isn't she? Mr. Alvarez smiled slowly. He placed the thimble into her palm. Sydney stared at it, overwhelmed. I don't even know how to use it properly. Mr. Alvarez stood. You will. And for the first time in the shop's history, the master tailor stepped back from the bench, not in resignation, but in trust. The next morning came with pressure. Merrick paced the front showroom in a suit 2 shades too formal, phone in hand, rehearsing a welcome. A high-profile client was coming. Jordan Gray, action star, brand ambassador, and internet headline machine. Over 40 million followers. He'd posted just hours ago. Getting stitched at the most exclusive spot in the city. Let's see if they're worth the hype. Merrick had double-checked every mirror. The champagne was cold. The playlist had been updated. There were eucalyptus-scented towels in the restroom now. And then, just before the clock struck noon, where's Mr. Alvarez? Sydney stood by the side counter, chalk dust still on her apron. The silver thimble was on her finger. Merrick didn't even look at her when he asked, just scanned the floor in quiet panic. He's off today, she said calmly. He asked me to take this fitting. Merrick froze. You? Sydney nodded. Keanu sat nearby, flipping through a vintage tailoring catalog. He looked up. Good hands, he said simply. Merrick glanced at him, then back to Sydney. He hesitated, a war of ego and logistics ticking behind his eyes. Before he could object, the door swung open. Jordan Gray entered with a publicist, a cameraman, and the scent of curated cologne. Hey, I'm early, Jordan said, sunglasses still on indoors. Let's make me look invincible. Sydney smiled politely. Right this way. Jordan looked around. Where's the tailor guy everyone talks about? The legend? He trained me, Sydney said. Cool, he said, distracted. Hope you inherited his superpowers. She didn't flinch, just pointed to the fitting platform. The next 20 minutes were quiet precision. Sydney didn't chat much. She didn't perform. She didn't stumble. She worked, measured, pinned, noted, adjusted. Keanu watched from the lounge, silent, eyes steady. Even Merrick stayed quiet now, unsure whether to worry or just let it happen. Jordan rotated his shoulders. Damn, this feels... He looked down, surprised. Didn't even feel you pinned me. Sydney smiled. That's the point. When he stepped down, he shook her hand. You're better than most of the guys I've had in Europe. Keanu raised his teacup slightly from the corner. Sydney didn't beam. She didn't blush. She just nodded. Thanks, she said. But I'm not done learning yet. Later, in the back room, Merrick approached her. Quiet. He looked down at the clipboard of orders, then said, Mr. Alvarez said you'd be ready. I didn't listen. Sydney turned. I don't need your apology, she said. Just your trust. He nodded. You have it. On the other side of the door, Keanu smiled to himself. The hands had changed, but the thread? Still strong. 1 week later, the shop received an anonymous delivery, a large garment box. No return address. Wrapped in brown paper, sealed with wax stamped simply, Kiar. Sydney opened it carefully, Mr. Alvarez beside her. Inside, a suit. Not for Keanu. Not for anyone specific. Dark charcoal. 3-piece. Hand-finished. Impeccable. And folded on top, a note in Keanu's familiar handwriting. Not every suit needs a buyer. Sometimes it just needs a purpose. Use it when the moment is too quiet for cameras, but too important to miss. K. They didn't put on display. They didn't price it. They hung it in a side cabinet near the back, under a single soft light. No label, no tag. They called it, silently among themselves. The reminder, a few days later, Sydney was helping a young man from the neighborhood. His first job interview, his hands shaking too much to hold the tie straight. He couldn't afford much, but he wanted to try. Mr. Alvarez watched from the doorway, then nodded at the cabinet. Sydney hesitated, then opened it, and for the first time, the suit with no buyer met its wearer. He wore it out of the shop with tears in his eyes. Didn't even know who had made it possible. He just whispered, "I'll bring it back clean," as he walked into the light. Mr. Alvarez folded the empty hanger. Sydney smoothed the fabric on the cabinet rod. They didn't say much, because they didn't need to. That night, Merrick hosted a private dinner in the shop for the anniversary of its founding. A few loyal clients, past apprentices, one retired Italian tailor who flew in from Milan. They raised glasses to heritage, to fabric, to craft. But near the end of the evening, Keanu arrived, quiet as ever. He wasn't dressed to impress, just to honor. He carried something small, a black envelope sealed with silver thread, handed it to Merrick. Inside, a sketch. The original storefront from 1976. Cracked sign, worn awning, Mr. Alvarez, age 25, standing out front with a measuring tape and too much hope. And beneath it, handwritten in careful ink, built by hands, worn by souls. Merrick didn't speak for a moment, then simply said, "We'll frame it." After dessert, Keanu stood near the suit cabinet. He ran his fingers lightly over the glass. Mr. Alvarez joined him. "I thought I'd retire this year," the old man said softly. "You still might," Keanu replied, "but maybe not tomorrow." They both smiled. At 9:17 p.m., as the guests were leaving, someone paused to ask Sydney, "Do you know who that man is?" She smiled. "Yeah," then nodded toward Mr. Alvarez. "He's the one who made the place matter." 3 months later, a Wednesday, a small hand-lettered sign sat outside a downtown public library, tucked between weathered brick columns and a free food fridge. Intro to hand stitching with master tailor Mr. Alvarez. All ages welcome. Inside, the room wasn't glamorous. Fluorescent lights buzzed. Folding tables wobbled. The floor smelled faintly of glue sticks and old printer ink. But every chair was full. Kids, teens, one elderly woman in a sun hat, 2 boys from the local youth shelter, a mom with a baby asleep in a sling. And at the front, hand steady as ever, stood Mr. Alvarez. In a clean white shirt, sleeves rolled, thimbles shining on his finger. Sydney moved between tables, adjusting scissors and helping little fingers loop thread. "This is stronger than it looks," she told one girl, showing her how to tie off a stitch. Keanu sat quietly in the back, cross-legged on the floor, watching it all. No one bothered him. Most didn't even notice, and he liked it that way. Mr. Alvarez held up a square of canvas. "You don't need money to make something beautiful," he said. "You need patience, and kindness, and thread that doesn't give up." One boy raised his hand. "How do you know if something's good enough?" Mr. Alvarez smiled. "If you give with your full heart, it already is." A librarian passed by the door, paused, then whispered to Sydney, "This is the most people we've had in that room all year." Sydney beamed. "Then we better come back." By the end of the hour, the room was full of laughter, tangled string, and a few proud stitches. One kid had sewn their name into a square. Another made a tiny pocket with a flap. A girl handed Mr. Alvarez a misshapen heart with 3 loose edges. "It's ugly," she said. He looked at it gently. "No," he said, then held it up. "It's honest." As the class packed up, Keanu helped stack chairs. Mr. Alvarez wiped chalk dust off the folding table. Sydney zipped up the worn duffel with all the donated materials. And for a moment, they all stood together, quiet in the hum of the now empty room. Then Keanu said, "You know, I've been thinking." Mr. Alvarez raised an eyebrow. "Dangerous." Keanu grinned. "We should make a sign." "For what?" "For the cabinet. The one with the suit that has no buyer." Sydney looked up. "What would it say?" Keanu paused, then spoke softly. "Reserved for the one who needs it most, even if they don't know it yet." 1 year later, the city had changed in small, slow ways. A new cafe opened next to the tailor shop. The bus stop bench outside the library finally got fixed. But inside Merrick and Alvarez, everything felt steady. No velvet ropes, no champagne, just legacy stitched into every shoulder seam. The reserved suit cabinet still stood in the back, untouched, waiting, until today. He entered just before closing. A tall young man in borrowed dress pants, slightly too short. Shirt buttoned to the top, no tie. Shoulders square like armor. Jaw set like he was ready to be turned away. He held a folded letter in his hand, crinkled, like it had been read 100 times. Sidney stepped forward. "Can I help you?" He hesitated, then said, "My counselor told me to come here. She said there might be something for me." He looked down. Something to wear to court. Silence, not because of shame, but because of weight. Sidney glanced at the back room. Mr. Alvarez had already emerged. He looked at the boy, no questions in his eyes, only kindness. "What's your name?" he asked. The boy swallowed. "Aaron." Mr. Alvarez nodded once, then walked to the cabinet, unlocked it, opened the glass, and pulled out the suit. Charcoal, crisp, clean, waiting. He held it out. "For you." Aaron blinked. "I can't pay." "We're not asking you to." Aaron took it slowly, like touching something sacred. In the fitting room, Keanu waited. Not because he had to, because he wanted to. He stepped in, adjusted the shoulder seam, smoothed the collar. Aaron looked at him in the mirror. "You work here." Keanu smiled. "Only when it matters." Aaron looked down at himself, then back at his reflection. "I've never looked like this before." Keanu adjusted the sleeve, nodded. "You always did. Now they'll see it too." The next morning, Aaron walked into court in that suit. He didn't win everything, but the judge looked him in the eye. The system paused long enough to listen. And sometimes, that's all a suit needs to do. Back at the shop, Mr. Alvarez stood before the cabinet. Empty now. Finally, he turned to Sidney and handed her a folded card. She opened it. Inside, "This space will never be for sale. It will always be for someone worth believing in. Merrick and Alvarez." Later that night, Keanu sat in the library's sewing room. He placed a new label into a fresh jacket. No brand name, just initials. A.R. He folded it, set it beside a letter, then left the room without a sound. Because some suits carry more than thread. They carry people forward, into interviews, into trials, into first days, into hope, into visibility. Not every hero speaks loudly. Some just stitch quietly until someone finally says, "He built this." Keanu didn't just wear the suit. He made sure the world saw the hands that shaped it. And when he left, he didn't take anything. He left something behind.